So I've always been interested in kind of under these horrific circumstances like slavery, like how do traditions take root? What comes from Africa? What is borrowed from others? And then what do we make our own? So I've always been kind of fascinated by that. And um, I think the path for Thanksgiving in the Black community is very similar to what we find in other. Okay, we have turkey centering the meal, but then we have our soul food side dishes that kind of anchor it. And some of those are just traditional dishes like greens, black eyed peas, cornbread, things like that. We do dressing instead of stuffing. But then we bring in other things like chitlins, which is a reflection of the hog killing tradition of the fall, because traditionally in the South, they would wait until the fall to do the massive hog killings because basically it was cold enough, you didn't have a lot of flies. And so they would do that work. So that's where things like chitlins and other organ meats were available in mass quantities. And so it became kind of like a celebration dish. And then our sweet potato pie and things like that. So even going back into slavery, you can see enslaved people building these traditions and how they gain momentum, even as people left the South. And it's been interesting to me, these celebrations of Black Thanksgiving, to find out how many people outside the Black community have never heard of these foods or never had them. Like I'm always giving white people a hard time about choosing pumpkin pie over sweet potato pie. And more often than not, people say, I don't think I've ever had a sweet potato pie. A lot of people don't know about chitlins. And a lot of people are mystified that macaroni and cheese is a Thanksgiving side dish, as it is in our community. So I've been really fascinated by that. But, there is a sense of continuity in the presently constructed holiday meals going back through time in terms of what enslaved people ate. And so I don't know, I just dig that kind of stuff. I love seeing those traditions persist. And it's also interesting how to see these traditions take a regional twist and then a familial twist, so like regional twists, like for instance, people may have greens, right? And so some people may have collard greens on the table. My family, we grew up with mustard and turnip greens because my mom was from the upper South. She's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. So variations in that, what kind of dressing you have, people closer to the coastline will have oysters in their dressing and things like that. And people in New Orleans, Louisiana will have like a gumbo or some kind of twist. And I really love seeing those regional differences. Because it speaks to what was available locally. And we're at a time where we can get foods from any place, right? But hundreds of years ago, you were tied to what was locally available. And so some of these food traditions still reflect that. And even though in a time when we can get everything, right, there's no reason why people have to eat collard greens. They could eat any kind of green, but no, that has cultural memory. It may have something specific to their family. You may remember a particular loved one made this dish really well. And so you think about that loved one and that dish at the same time. And as we know, there are certain dishes that, not everybody's going to eat it. Only a certain person can make that. And they have to establish their credentials.
Absolutely, such as the macaroni and cheese. Let's start there.
Yep. In my family, it was more rolls. We had a certain person who made rolls. And other than that, we weren't really, and it's over time, we have a certain person making chitlins only because he just likes to make them. But, in my family, we weren't hardcore about a lot of these things as others. It was just like, okay, that person makes it well, we'll just, have them do it. But if somebody else showed up with a similar dish, I don't think we would deny them space on the table. But we have those roles in my family as well.
Too, that also goes to speak to some another unique piece to this whole thing, and that is those unwritten rules. But also when it comes to these more traditional Black gatherings, the role of that generational divide there.
So I think the biggest way that plays out, well, let me just say this, the generational, for lack of a better term, the generational momentum in these gatherings is strong. So people often hold to the family tradition. I would say that probably one way that that's changed is people seeking healthier options to the traditional holiday food. So you're starting to see a lot more vegan dishes show up at these gatherings. And, you might get the side eye, but more and more people are embracing that, and you're starting to see, you know, smoked turkey or no meat at all get swapped out for the traditional pork. So I think that's one way that the tradition is showing. And then you're having people to some extent introduce new dishes, right? They're just like, because the kids are in a more multicultural environment than say their parents' generation. So they might be bringing in some Latino dishes or, you know, some Asian dishes, things like that. So we're starting to see those things on the edge, like, oh yeah, yeah, why don't y'all try it? But I think the biggest change has been just the shift to more health conscious food and more vegan showing up on the table. Vegan dishes showing up on the table. Yeah, I was a little surprised because my last book was on barbecue. I was really surprised how many people ate barbecue on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And part of that is a legacy of slavery as well, because usually the week between Christmas and New Year's was typically a day off on a lot of plantations, and so people had more time to do something that was labor intensive like barbecue. And just reading oral histories of people that left the South during the Great Migration and landed in places like New Jersey and others, you know, there's stories of people barbecuing on Christmas Day, and despite even if it's cold outside. So I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, it's kind of these holidays have, I don't know if the right word is multiple identities, but culturally they have different, you know, we're kind of operating in different spots. Like we have a foot in majority culture in the sense that we, you know, have the turkey or the ham, but then we have most of our body in our own culture, and we're just playing out with these dishes, you know, that we are used to and familiar with, and the ones that we love and celebrate.